What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Sex Education Season 4, the fourth and final season of the Netflix series. It's been 2 years since Season 3, and now we're back to the UK, back to Moordale. One last go-round with, I think, one of the bigger surprise hits in, the last few years. The show debuting in 2019 kind of out of nowhere, having a standout ensemble cast. A lot of people in this cast are going to be around a very long time, and just came a really solid hit. And of course, this is a series that had to end. I'm happy it ended with season 4 just because, again, most of this cast is pretty big now, and I feel like they didn't really have time to make this show anymore. And the whole conceit, of course, of high school kids exploring themselves and their sexual identities and their sexual proclivities and things of that nature, that's not a show that can run forever, right? There's a natural endpoint to these things. So it makes sense that the show has ended. But I've been a huge fan of the series to this point. I was definitely anticipating season 4. And I have to say, season 4, the final 8 episodes, I liked it for sure. I was broadly satisfied. I will say this felt like a bit of an overstuffed season. I thought season 3 was definitely a return to form. And after, a dynamite season 1 and a bit of a meandering season 2. Season 4, I think I have below season 1 and 3, but above 2 on my first gut thought there, solid. And I think it wraps things up pretty well and makes some interesting decisions. But I did have a feeling that the ensemble had just kind of grown a bit large at this point, and there were certain storylines that just didn't feel like they had the oxygen they deserved, and whole characters, as a result, really not getting as much time as they needed. On the other hand, the stuff you are really invested in, which I think is really the core ensemble, the core trio, if you will, of Otis, Maeve, and Eric, we've been invested watching them. So anything involving them, I was pretty into. Some of the other supporting characters, though, I was less interested in this time around. But overall, I think you have a big change with season 4, where we're no longer at whatever the high school that we spent so much time in the first 3 seasons. They've all moved on, and now they're at the sixth form Cavendish College. It's called. It's kind of like junior college we would think of here in the States, and meanwhile, Maeve is of course going to study in America, having left for that at the end of season 3. So we're in a different setting. We're in different circumstances. As a result, some characters are no longer on the series. Convenient way to write people off. But honestly, most of the cast is at Cavendish, which I thought was pretty amusing, pretty contrived, of course. But it's TV. It is what it is. It's fine. And I think, I guess the core conflict to the plot of season 4 is probably the kind of unexpected rivalry between Otis and this character named O at Cavendish, who was already at the college and had already established a very successful and popular therapist counseling service, much like Otis, of course, had made his name on in the first 3 seasons. So there's natural butting heads there, and a rivalry quickly ensues. That was pretty amusing. All like the class politics, school politics, vote for O, vote for Otis stuff. That was great. I loved all that stuff because it really felt like kind of the core of Sex Education Season 1, core Sex Education, which was the in the school adolescent experience. Loved that stuff. And, as a result, this college, I think amusingly, is very progressive, very forward-thinking. It's student-driven. As a result, everyone is happy to be themselves there. You see all kinds of walks of life, all kinds of identities, orientations, etc., present at Cavendish, and it's a positive place for sure. And I think my one issue with that was that it's kind of easy to see some of the new storylines that are being introduced with some of these new characters. A lot of these characters become close with Eric. Eric actually making some like real long-standing queer friends, at college. something Otis couldn't really give him, of course, because Otis doesn't have that experience. And this actually comes up, I think, pretty intelligently later in the show. I think the issue with those characters, which I liked, I thought the performances were fun, these characters aren't given enough time to be much more beyond the identity aspect of what they are. Like one of these characters is hard of hearing and is kind of constantly reminding everyone that you should make sure she can see your lips, so she can read your lips, and she gives a speech later on. Like there's not a lot to her character beyond reminding you not to be ableist, basically, which is all fine and good. It's just the character itself is quite archetypical. You have this other character who is post-op trans character, and they aren't like able to do much of anything in the series beyond be there for Cal from season 3, who's going through their own gender dysphoria issues at the moment. These characters aren't given, I think, a lot to do beyond push other plots forward. So I had a hard time, like I just kind of like noticed that, and it kind of stood out to me, like Viv goes to college, right? And she meets up with his boyfriend, and the boyfriend is seems nice, but eventually becomes an example of like a controlling relationship, and whatnot, and a form of domestic abuse in a certain sense. And again, good storyline. It feels like it fits within the ethos of sex education, but I feel like some of the side plots with season 4 just felt like they're kind of like trying to check boxes. Like, hey, this is something that fits in our theme, our thesis of this show. We haven't covered this yet. Let's get it in now for the final season. I feel like they're kind of checking some boxes. I don't know. Nothing egregious, but just I felt some of the supporting characters were just kind of means to an end. So that's that. I think even Cal's character is kind of sidelined and not really there, not having a whole lot to do until the very end, when Cal's insecurities and lack of self-worth and confusion comes to a head in a really serious manner. It's like a lot of means to an end type stuff, unfortunately. I think the best stuff this season for sure, probably Eric. Honestly, it's a great Eric season. Eric goes through quite the journey. Ncuti Gatwa, really tremendous performance. Quite the journey for him as an actor as well. Obviously, he'll be the new Doctor Who very soon. Quite the accomplishment, obviously. I think everything Eric goes to, particularly with faith, and coming to grips with being happy and proud of who he is, and he has been like that as a character for some time, but not being afraid to hide who he is within the church, which might not be as accepting of that. Pretty good. I thought the only thing I kind of got hung up on with that was the Joey Turner Smith being like a manifestation of God, like a vision, basically, to Eric. I don't remember if we saw kind of like pseudo-realist, science fiction type stuff, fantastical stuff in previous seasons. I really don't remember. I guess maybe we have, but it kind of like stood out to me as being like, wait, this is not usually our tone. What's up with this? But overall, the Eric journey and Eric's, relationship with Otis, as Eric and Otis take some time apart towards the end of the season before eventually reconciling. Obviously, they would reconcile. It's TV, but I think it's pretty intelligent. I think general, the character of O, played by Thadia Graham, really liked her presence on the series, both as the rival to Otis, some fun beats where she ends up teaming up with Otis's mom, Jean, of course, Gillian Anderson, because, Jean is doing a radio program and O is hired to kind of be the second chair, and they play off each other and actually have pretty good chemistry. Like that kind of extra wrinkle I enjoyed. Then having Ruby have a past with O in a negative sense and not liking each other, especially from the Ruby side. Ruby getting invested in Otis's campaign as a way to get revenge against O. Again, I loved all that kind of plot stuff. But Thadia Graham, maybe it's just her Irish accent. I don't know. I thought she was really, really fun to be with. Ruby, Ruby obviously had an amazing season 3 as a character. Mimi Keane really shining. She has less to do in season 4. Ultimately, I think the character gets a fun resolution just because think it's kind of clear to everyone who watches it that like Otis never treated the character, or Otis never treated Ruby well. That would be kind of dumb if they ended up together. So it sucks to watch season 4 Otis again fumble the bag and like just treat Ruby poorly and be a selfish person and not see what he has right in front of him. Probably for the best they didn't end up together. So I mean, as much as y'all would have liked more Ruby, and just because I really like the Mimi Keen performance, she's very effervescent, very striking in her presence. But I think that kind of worked out for the best. It's really fun when like Ruby's like in her bag, trying to play politics at school. Again, reminiscent of the early days of her character in season 1. And yeah, I think if anything, Otis has felt like less and less of a central force to the series, especially as the core conceit of the sex education, the anonymous counseling in the bathroom stall of season 1, as that has gone far to the rear view and this has become a larger ensemble show. It's really the characters interacting with Otis that we're more interested and invested in than Otis himself. Characters like Eric, characters like Ruby, and of course characters like Maeve. Maeve, though, in season 4, large parts of season 4, is like season 2, kind of separated from the rest of the ensemble. I really would have loved if she had more time to be with the ensemble. That being said, I think the funeral episode towards the end of the season is really strong. Really nice to see the old teachers come back in that moment. The emotional beats, though, that the Maeve character goes through leading up to that funeral scene, I think is really strong. Again, the Emma Mackey performance is, I think, full of a lot of depth, honestly, and that's why she immediately stood out as the breakthrough in season 1 alongside Ncuti Gatwa. Like, I think Emma Mackey's just a really, really talented actor, and obviously her and Otis, the will they won't they that we've been with for 4 seasons now, that was going to be resolved one way or another in season 4. And I'm not necessarily surprised that they don't end up together in the finale. People were saying it, a few seasons back, but we kind of got the normal people, Connell and Marianne type vibe with this one. And in turn, she does decide to go back to America. And they both are a bit mature enough to realize they can't make it work with distance, so they just shouldn't try. And on one hand, it's not the rom-com, feel-good fairy tale ending that maybe would have been fun and would have felt like a culmination of things people have been excited about. It does feel like a bit of a earned ending, or realistic ending, I suppose you could say. Tough beat for Otis as a character to not end up with Maeve nor Ruby, though, I have to say. Really, no one ends up with much of anyone if you think about the core ensemble, which is interesting. Or I guess apart from Amy and Isaac, which I actually thought was done with a lot of warmth, and Amy Lou Wood is, I think, and again, one of the underrated aspects of the ensemble. The Isaac character actually had a fun way to stick around in season 4. I wasn't sure how that would go. But yeah, I mean, I think the lesson with season 4 for me is, I think I would just like more time with the core group. Like I think a character like Adam, right? Adam has had quite the 360, however you want to say it, the journey that character's been on, as well as the whole family, right? Adam's dad as well. I was never super invested with the reboot of that character. I wouldn't have minded that character to not be around anymore post Adam and Eric's relationship. So, Adam going through his journey and finding his confidence again, at least a little bit, and his family reconciling. Yeah, it's kind of the predictable way that was going to go. There wasn't really a whole lot more to it because we didn't have enough time because we're servicing so many storylines. I wouldn't have minded if we didn't have any of that at all. But this show was kind of committed to Adam and Connor Swindell's performance as Adam kind of the whole time. So not surprised. Similarly, Jackson. Jackson has been a character that has been less central to interacting with our core trio as the seasons have gone on. And, season 3, Jackson and Cal actually was a pretty solid, use of giving Jackson something to do, but kind of faded away with season 4. And again, like some plot points that we hadn't got before that I feel like Sex Education was kind of checking some boxes. Like, oh, Jackson has a lump on his nut. Better check that out. it's important to do that kind of thing, figure out what's going on. Of course, nothing was wrong with Jackson. He's okay. Jackson, not actually adopted, but you should talk to your adopted parents if you want to about these kind of things. There's really not a whole lot more to it. He's a good friend of Viv in the season. That's kind of it. It's like, I like Jackson a lot in the early seasons, but there's not a lot whole going on with him this season either. Like spending like decent chunks of scenes with these subplots that don't really have any room or oxygen to go any further than where they end up going. It doesn't ruin the season for me or anything, but I just think would have liked more time with kind of the core group. Like I would have loved more Ruby scenes. And I think that's because I love the Ruby character individually, but Ruby is also really central to interacting with Maeve and Otis. Heck, if anything, I guess more Adam scenes would have been good if Adam was going to go back in the direction of interacting with Eric again. Anything. I mean, I would like more Amy stuff, Amy and Isaac stuff, because Amy and Isaac are in the Maeve orbit. I think we just kind of ballooned a little bit too much with this ensemble, which is okay. I think these are all fun performers, and it's been a fun journey. So it's kind of a natural, sin to happen with constructing a series. It's gonna go that way. Obviously, this is something that probably would have continued to get worse and worse if the show kept going, and the show probably would have not felt like it had anywhere left to go. So, like I said, I think it's important that it ended where it did. I'm trying to think of other moments that I liked. I took so many notes watching this series. Just kind of notes here. The O music video I thought was really amusing. In general, like everything with like the school, which is obviously like pretty fantastical. Like I don't know of any junior colleges that are organized or not necessarily organized at all like that. But fun to be with for TV setting for sure. Hannah Gadsby basically cameoing as the radio boss of Gene at the station. Again, doesn't have a whole lot to do, but a very funny cold open in episode 5 where she puts olive oil down there to funny effect. I think when the show is kind of doing basic body humor stuff, it's at its best. Think about the very opening of season 1, right, where Otis struggles to take a nude of himself, and his lack of confidence to even send the nude back to Maeve, completely, reciprocating such a thing, obviously completely putting a wrench into their distance relationship. Really fucked up way to go. I was really annoyed to see it go that way. But then, of course, this being played for complete laughs later on in, I believe, the same episode where Otis airplays his phone screen out in front of the whole school, and they see his nudes, and we learn that he was taking flaccid penis nudes, and also hadn't shaved his pubes in a succinct manner. That kind of body humor stuff remains just really funny shit. And obviously there's a long list of stuff that Sex Education throughout the run has done like that. That was quite enjoyable. I guess Jean's sister, I forget her name, coming in, being a bull in a china shop, and then Jean's character and her kind of reconciling, going through some things. I think it was okay. Her sister was obviously very annoying, very tough to be with, which can grate on you a little bit. I wouldn't have minded less of that. But, they're kind of committed to Jean and Gillian Anderson's performance. Like, they're going to have Jean, so they had to find some way to have her in the show. And I actually enjoyed Jean and the radio station and the sister and how all that kind of worked. I actually kind of liked that more than, the pregnancy stuff from season 3, which I felt kind of spun its wheels for the episodes on end before she finally gave birth at the end of the season. I guess the who is the real dad stuff is not really built up as much of a thing to be concerned about, even if that was kind of cliffhangery in season 3. Not really a big deal. Ultimately, I'd say I'm pretty satisfied with how it went. I wasn't like a hardcore shipper or anything, so I didn't like demand that Otis or Maeve or Ruby or whoever end up with anyone. Like, it's okay, it's all good. And I think it's a pretty satisfying show. And again, I think it'll be remembered as a show that came out of nowhere and really went beyond people's expectations. And of course, now is the birthplace of many young actors we'll be with a long time. Obviously, Ncuti Gatwa with Doctor Who. Emma Mackey, of course, was already in Barbie. She was in Death on the Nile. She was a finalist for Lois Lane in the upcoming Superman movie. We'll be hearing from her a long time. Connor Swindell's on the SAS Rogue Hero series. Amy Lou Wood had a BAFTA for Sex Education earlier season. Gillian Anderson. Mimi Keene doesn't have a whole lot on her plate yet, but I'm sure she'll be around. So I think we'll look back on this show in the years to come as just the launching pad for so many talented young actors, young British actors. So yeah, shout out Sex Education. I don't want to say happy to see it go because I like the show so much, but I'm not sad to see it go either because I think it's the right time. It's good that they decided to end it how they did, go out on their own terms, and yeah, pretty satisfied with it. So let me know, how did you feel about Sex Education season 4? Did you find it satisfying? How did you feel about the finale? Are you okay with Otis and Maeve not being together? What are your thoughts on that? And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.